Welcome back to the All Turtles Podcast, a show about the future of work, the future of health, and entrepreneurs building the future with tech like AI. I'm John Cifuentes, co-founder of All Turtles. Today, Jessica Collier will be hosting a conversation about a product that's helping to usher in the future of work by using technology to build better work environments for employees. It's an All Turtles product called Spot, an AI workplace harassment and reporting tool that, if you're a regular listener of this show, you've probably heard it discussed before. Today, Jessica is talking to Kelly Chen and Micah Rivera about how they created and launched a new harassment training feature.
This is Jessica Collier. I'm the CEO of Spot, and we're here today to talk about the sexual harassment training that Spot just launched last week, hot off the presses. And I'm here with Micah Rivera, who's our lead designer at Spot, and Kelly Chen, who's one of the writers at All Turtles, who has been working on the harassment training content. So, friends, let's talk about why we built harassment training. Woohoo! So there's a lot of sexual harassment training available in the world, and there has been for a long time. And I thought it would be kind of interesting to talk a little bit about why at Spot it was actually sort of a hard decision for us to decide to build training.
That's because, one, there's a lot of really, really bad training. It's terrible. It's someone standing in front of a PowerPoint presentation who's missing their fonts, taking you through an hour of scenarios that seem so very basic. Sometimes they're animated. Most of the time it's a video, and it's really creepy. Like, if you haven't experienced sexual harassment in the workplace, you're witnessing it now.
And it's super outdated.
Yeah, and I mean, we reviewed some of it, and I will say, like, it's hard not to have a visceral reaction to that kind of stuff. So, one, it's bad, and two, the way that sexual harassment training is being delivered currently helps people sort of double down on their biases or completely check out. So, I think we had trouble deciding whether we wanted to do it at all because it's such a big issue to tackle. We knew that if we were going to do it, we needed to do it very differently. So we kind of let it sit on the back burner while we focused on other things, but also let it kind of ruminate and, see where we could go with it.
Yeah. And we reviewed a lot of the research that has been conducted around harassment training. And what a lot of the research shows is exactly what, Micah, you're saying, is that the ways in which training is formulated and delivered frequently results in things like backlash or people digging into their previously held beliefs rather than sort of opening their minds and expanding their perspectives, which is what it's designed to do. And I think one of the, what research points to is that one of the main problems with a lot of harassment training is that it doesn't do a good job of making people kind of feel like they're being taught or engaged. It makes people feel like they're there to be fixed, right? Or to be lectured to or to be accused. And so one of the things that we've really tried to do with the Spot training is to avoid accusing any specific group or particular group of problematic behavior, right? Because that's the easiest way to put people on the defensive and to actually result in people feeling just worse than they already did about the very topics that we're trying to make everyone more open-minded about.
Totally. So the proactive approach, I think, is what is differentiating us from, I think, the rest of harassment and discrimination training. It's not, we're delivering this training because something happened. We're hoping to partner with people so we can get in front of those things. And that way, you don't feel singled out. And if you don't feel singled out, you're less likely to retaliate.
Yeah. And Kelly, do you want to speak to some of the ways that we've designed the content? I think one of a very specific decision that we made was not to put the trainee in the position of either being the perpetrator in a scenario or of being the person who's experiencing the harassment. Do you want to talk about why?
Sure. I think one of the things that we did with in terms of conducting and designing sort of the scenarios that we introduce, we wanted to make sure that it was a very nuanced and sort of whole sort of experience. And that's partly because in these situations, there normally isn't just one person who's the victim and one person who's the perpetrator. There's a whole other cast of characters, including bystanders and witnesses. And kind of including all of this in a scenario makes people feel more invested in the situation. I think there's more empathy in terms of this is a situation that I could be a part of and potentially be in, and walking them through what their rights are and what their options are in a step-by-step process helps them figure out and kind of understand what to do in situations like that. Because a lot of times, they're not black and white. They're very, very nuanced. And not every situation is the same. And even if it's the same behavior, to different people, they might have different reactions and emotional responses.
I mean, to your point about actual harassment scenarios in workplace incidents being really nuanced and not black and white at all, I think that goes to what Micah is saying about how so much of the training that is currently available is outdated and frankly often very heteronormative, right? So I think a lot of people come away from sexual harassment training with the idea that sexual harassment is primarily about a man, for example, inappropriately touching a woman in the office, right? We all know, or at least we are all learning, I think, as a society that sexual harassment is a much bigger umbrella than that. So let's talk about some of the topics that we cover in the training that I think people are maybe not accustomed to seeing in traditional harassment training.
Well, I want to just say personally, I'm very proud of our team because some of the first topics we're tackling are gender identity discrimination and sexual orientation discrimination. There's something really wonderful about being on a team that's not afraid to sort of tackle that in the first episode. We want to, I think, make a statement about who we are and what we're interested in and be really brave. Those are big topics. And outside of, I think, the bubble that we're in, people have a little less knowledge or understanding of those specific topics. So I just want to say, I'm so excited and so proud of this team that we can do that first. So it's like a 1-2. Here we go. We're sort of announcing our intentions in that way. And I think, especially in user testing or the people that we've taken through the first episode, people respond really well to the fact that we're doing that right away. So I'm very proud of us.
Yeah, it definitely sets a statement, makes a statement that we're doing that in the first episode.
It has definitely been challenging to tackle topics that people are not accustomed to finding in harassment training in a way that does not feel preachy.
Right.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the process, Kelly, for creating the content and the scenarios?
I think a lot of credit goes to the other people who've all been involved in the process. This team has been very talented and very empathetic and so considerate in every single word choice that we use. And that team includes Anna Rosen, as well as Paige and
Anna Rosen Wong.
Anna Rosen Wong, Paige Saez, and also Lisa Sanchez. And I think one thing that we started straight off the bat when we decided to do this was to not try to single anybody out, and also try to put people in the shoes that they normally wouldn't be in, or think that they wouldn't be in. I think when it comes to harassment and discrimination training, you always hear about incidences that happen, and in retrospect, you have so much clarity, that was wrong. But when it happens to you, or when you are in a position where you're witnessing it happen to somebody else, you're feeling so many other emotions like fear, retaliation, not knowing what your rights are, and even not even knowing if, you should step in and intervene and help someone, and how to do it in the right way. All of that is very, very complicated. So these scenarios, we're trying to walk you through those situations, and just kind of ground you in the sense that there's no one right or wrong way to do things always, and just kind of give you some options on how to approach it.
And I know that as we've been creating the content for all of the scenarios, there have definitely been times where we've had to gut check ourselves, right? Where, we're writing a scenario and we might actually be kind of rendering someone in a scenario guilty before they've even done anything. Right? I have to go through and take out language that kind of condemns someone before they've even done anything.
Right. Which I think was an interesting gut check for the team because, that is what happens in an actual discrimination and harassment process when they're going through an investigation too. Just because you file a report doesn't mean that person is guilty or they have done something wrong. One thing that I found really comforting is that people, very smart people, including the people in this room, and as well as researchers, are aware of the process it takes to handle a harassment and discrimination complaint. There are steps already there that you just have to follow to kind of guide you through it all.
Yeah. And I think by putting the trainee in a position where in most of our scenarios, they are observing something that is happening. I know that one of the things we're trying to do is to shed a light on how people can be responsible allies in the workplace when you see something that's happening or you know of something that's happening. Like when we conducted our survey, our witness survey, and we surveyed over 1,000 people who had witnessed harassment or discrimination in the workplace, one of the most frequent things we heard from people was that, number one, they didn't report to HR, right? 77% of them never reported to HR. And number two, most of them regretted it, sometimes for decades, right? They would say things like, I felt tons of regret. I still have a lot of guilt about not speaking up. And the very few who did speak up talked about themselves in this way where they were really proud that they had stood up for someone, right? They used phrases like hero, for example.
And a lot of, I think, research shows that people who don't report to HR oftentimes tell other people outside of the company, their friends, their family. So it's not that people aren't talking about all...
And in the company.
Yeah, and in the company, just not to the right person.
Right.
And so these discussions are happening. We just have to kind of channel them in the right way.
Right. And then put, hopefully, processes in place so that HR and leadership can deal with them in ways that are responsible and effective.
Right. So I think that's what is really important about training, is shedding light on what that process is. And that process likely already exists. So it creates this team effort, I think, and accessibility to the HR team. But I think more importantly, we also allow people to make anonymous reports with Spot. So that is something that we've started with and we're going to continue doing. And that, I think, will help people speak up more often, especially on the witness side.
Yeah. And do you want to talk about how reporting connects to the training experience?
Yeah.
Since you designed that.
At the end of every episode, we do a lightweight survey. People can talk about if they've experienced anything in the scenarios that we've presented. And we also give them the opportunity to say, like, hey, actually, that did happen. Maybe I didn't realize it was harassment or discrimination. Now I understand that. Now I would like to first, if I'd like to make a report just for me, so like a private report just for my records, that doesn't mean, hey, I need to report to HR. This is just something that I can document. If it happens again, I can say, hey, not only did it happen this time, but I also have, a PDF recording what happened in the last incident. And if they're feeling like they want to escalate it to HR, they have the opportunity to make a more formal report. And again, they can remain anonymous if they choose. So that, I think, tying together the experience of training and reporting sort of happen naturally. It makes sense that you would present a story or present the user with a scenario. If it resonates with them, then giving them the opportunity to create their own private PDF and a report made a lot of sense. So it's just sort of stitching together. Spot is not just a reporting tool, but a suite of features, I think, to empower the workplace and empower the employee.
Yeah. I mean, historically, we've been like a very reactive tool. We're like, hey, we're here if anything happens, right? And now we're saying, we're here to sort of help everyone understand like what is okay and what is not okay. And then that way people have familiarity and trust already built in so that when something does happen, they feel confident knowing where to go to speak up about it.
Yeah. And I think that's the most important part. I think the piece of Spot that people spend the most time with is the definitions or the legal definitions in the handbook, the FAQ.
Yeah, that's true.
People want to know what their rights are and what they should do. And if something that's happened to them does qualify as harassment and discrimination. So I think being able to sort of see these scenarios, it's not just about the story we're telling, but we're also giving you legal definitions and explanations to help contextualize what you're seeing. So
yeah, and that helps you become aware too of all these conversations taking place outside of work, in media. California and New York just recently passed laws that kind of strengthen, victims who are reporting sexual harassment and discrimination. And these laws aren't always set in stone. They're always evolving as the conversation changes. And I think Spot does a really good job, at least we try to, of kind of incorporating all of that so it's much more fluid. And even if laws are changing, we kind of ground you with the concepts of what you need to understand how to move forward.
Right. And the laws that are changing, I think, in the very near future, especially in California and New York, they're redefining what it means to be small business and what, the employee count that you have. I think before it was you needed to provide harassment and discrimination reporting to companies with employees of 50 or more. In California, that's changing to 5. So 5 or more. And it's not just full-time employees. It's part-time employees. Contractors, interns, et cetera. So it's a big deal.
No one in your company that will get away with not going through sexual harassment and discrimination training.
Right.
And in New York State, it's everybody.
Yeah.
It's all employers.
And I think, hey, training sucks. Let's be honest. Like, no one loves to do training. So how do we make it suck less? How do we make this something that's engaging and proactive, and it's not like something you want to claw your eyeballs out? You don't want to. Managers are required for 2 hours of training. Like they say, after 20 minutes in a presentation, people lose interest. So what we did, I think, which is unique, is try to break up these episodes into or break up the scenarios into chunks. So episodes, 10 minutes apiece. And that, that's something that you can do sitting on the BART on your commute into work. That's, I spend more time than that playing Words with Friends, I think, every day. So making something easily accessible and consumable, something that you can do as an employee at your own pace during your own time. And you can fulfill that requirement as an employee. Doing 6-10-minute episodes brings you to an hour of compliance. And that is great, because that means you're compliant for the next 2 years.
Yeah. And I think the thing that was so interesting to me when we started talking about building training a year ago, when we were like, let's look into it, let's do our homework, let's make sure that we know what we're getting ourselves into. When we started looking into it, the thing that was so shocking to me was that, yes, harassment training sucks. Everyone agrees that it sucks. It's also just historically been completely ineffective.
Right.
Like, all of the research points to the fact that traditional harassment training does not work.
And they spend a lot of money on it, too.
And people spend tons of money on it, tons of company resources. We've been doing it the same way for decades. And every single study says that it doesn't work. What's interesting, though, is that those same studies say that the companies who actually go to great lengths to do sort of holistic harassment prevention work, those efforts do make a difference, right? The training might be terrible and the training itself might be ineffective. But if what you're doing is part of an overall effort of non-harassment, you will be able to move the needle. And so I think what we're trying to do with Spot, at least, is create a tool that is in itself a holistic non-harassment, or a tool that helps you move towards a culture of non-harassment.
Yeah, a proactive culture tool.
Yeah, exactly.
TM.
TM. No, I think what we actually went with is sexual harassment training that actually works.
Yeah.
TM.
So we removed the sexual harassment training that doesn't suck. TM.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
No, and so I think the thing that makes it really unique, again, is the fact that we're splitting it up. It's an illustrated series. It should feel like an Instagram story. Again, I probably spend way more time on Instagram than any kind of requirement for a single episode. So we try to keep the user engaged with using our illustrations, pacing, storytelling. Literally, we're using the sort of visual mechanisms of what you would do in an illustrated book. And it's not ever going to be the same. We also mix it up by asking you questions. That's part of the requirements that we have, is to test assessment, but not necessarily record.
Well, to be interactive. Yeah.
Not necessarily record your answers, but just to see where you are. And I think being able to switch that up, people stay engaged and it doesn't feel monotonous.
Well, on the HR side, what I think is kind of interesting, it had never occurred to me before we started building this that HR usually has a one-directional, that harassment training is usually a unidirectional, right? HR sends it out to everybody and requires them to consume it. And they don't actually get anything back from that other than a lot of grief about how terrible training is. And so we were like, well, what if HR actually got insights back? What if this were a reciprocal thing where they sent out training and they got information back from their employees, right? And that's the lightweight surveys that you were talking about. What if this were more of a conversation?
Well, and additionally, within the episodes themselves, as we do explanations and definitions, we allow the user to ask HR questions anonymously. I think that's huge. This might be something you didn't know. You're interacting with a concept that is foreign to you, or maybe you're uncomfortable with, and this allows you to ask HR a question without saying who you are. So you sort of anonymous yourself, so you don't have to be afraid that that person's going to think lesser of you, or that you're, not with it or woke or whatever, to get feedback. And hopefully the answer that you receive is enlightening. So we allow people to interact with either someone on the HR team, that's their designated person to answer questions, I don't know what we call them, or an HR expert outside of their own organization.
Yeah. So episodes 1 through 4 are available now. There are 6 episodes for employees and then an additional 6 episodes for supervisors. So an hour of training for employees, 2 hours of training for supervisors. You can preview part of the first episode at talktospot.com/training. And if you're interested in talking to us about it, you can always get in touch at hello@talktospot.com. Thanks, Micah. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you.
So now it's time for a listener question. This one comes in from Bill on Twitter. And Bill says, is there any plans to mention on the podcast that October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month?
So this is a closed question. The answer, I believe, is no. I did not know that it was Cybersecurity Awareness Month.
I Googled this to confirm it, and it turns out October has a lot of awareness to it.
What else is there, John?
Do you really want me to go through? Because there's about 14 of them. I can.
Maybe just give us a sample.
It's Breast Cancer Awareness. This is for the United States. So it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. It's Filipino American History Month. LGBT History Month in U.S. and Canada. National Bullying Prevention Month. What else? National Pizza Month. Key.
That pizza seems less important than
right,
those other things.
It is, per Wikipedia, National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Very important. National Disability Employment Awareness Month. It kind of goes on. National Arts and Humanities Month.
When does the, I believe it is very soon, I should know the answer to this, the California Cyber Protection Act. So in other words, the U.S.'s first step towards GDPR, basically, or California's answer to GDPR, I believe goes into effect the end of this year. Is that right?
It was January 2020.
Yeah. I think it is. But I mean, that means you have to be compliant before then. So I've actually been thinking a lot about cyber protection because, Spot is GDPR compliant, but we have to do a couple of things to get compliant with the CCPA.
Okay.
So yeah.
So are you on the way to doing those things? Or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We have, definitely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Can you talk about it at all? Or?
No.
Okay.
In the interest of protecting the security and privacy of our customers.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
We should talk about cybersecurity awareness in October.
Okay.
To be on theme.
We'll make a point to have a guest expert on this topic. Although Phil's kind of an expert on this topic too. No? Your body language says no. Your laughter says maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, good question. Thanks, Bill. For any additional questions, please send them via email at hello@all-turtles.com or tweet us at @allturtlesco.
You know what would be really funny is if October ended up being the month where Russia really did hack us.
This podcast is a production of the All Turtles Worldwide Media Empire. We recorded this episode in the world-class Donatello Studios in San Francisco, California. Thanks to Jessica Collier for this episode. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, send us an email to hello@all-turtles.com. Marie reads every message. Thanks to everyone who made this episode possible, including Jim Metzendorf for editing, Marie McCoy-Thompson for producing, Chris Plug for his audio expertise, Micah Rivera for our artwork, and Matt Armerman for our theme music. On behalf of Jessica Collier, Phil Libin, and yours truly, John Cifuentes, and the rest of the All Turtles team, thanks for listening.